Consciousness, the final frontier. These are the voyages into the universe between your ears. Our mission, to explore collective wisdom, seek out amazing secrets, and spread the message of personal potential.
Hello out there in podcast land. This is Tim C. Starr, your host for the Universe Between Your Ears. I'm joined as always by my co-pilot, Mr. Gabi Musheyev.
Hello to everyone. It's great to be here again. Thanks, team.
And we're looking forward to this one for a long time. Our guest today is a gentleman by the name of Jay Wong. Jay is a serial entrepreneur, business advisor, a real estate investor, and he's host of the Inner Changemaker. It's a #1 rated self-help podcast on iTunes, and it's consistently rated in the top 100 podcasts in iTunes Canada. Jay was recently named as one of the top 40 millennial influencers to follow in 2018. So write that down. His mission is to create empowering media that summarizes all of the great lessons covered on his show by other successful change makers. He hopes that these combined journeys will help business owners grow their businesses through online marketing and elevate their leadership. So, Jay, first of all, thank you for being here. It took a little arm twisting and a little cajoling and stuff, but we finally got you here. So happy to see your face.
Yeah, happy to see you both, and really excited to be just sharing this time with each and every single one of you, and obviously for what we're going to create here. Cool.
I want to start really with sort of pointing out that there's a couple of things. Your show is focused at entrepreneurs, basically, right? The business people.
Yeah.
And those are the people that you're talking to. But in this bio that I just read, this last piece is kind of the same thing that we're trying to do, right? Is we bring people in, and we're having these conversations, and we're recognizing some clear themes in a lot of things, and we're sort of aimed at people on a personal level, but there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah,
and personal growth is kind of the bottom line on what we're focused on, but it's also a big piece of being a successful entrepreneur at pretty much any level, I would think. So maybe we can start there and talking about, what it takes to travel that journey. There's so much, because I was also listening to one of your podcasts here just a little while ago, and it's the best advice anybody ever gave you.
Yeah.
I was like, I got to talk about that too. So, because that applies, that's not just about business. That was really about just life in general. And so, any place that sort of is like waving a flag at you that you feel like you really want to start on?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Tim, it reminds me of this one story. About 1.5 years ago, I did hire someone to help me with my business, right? Someone to kind of really help me with operations, systems, all the really sexy stuff, right? That entrepreneurs, I don't know, I can't speak for all of them, but I know some of them like really love that kind of stuff. I know for me, you could probably tell just by hearing the sound of my voice, and if you're watching this, you could tell like I'm not necessarily like the most systems oriented individual. So I hired this person, and we've become closer friends now, but my intention with the hiring was that he was gonna help me grow and scale my business, right? And I was really excited. I'm like sharing with my girlfriend. I'm like sharing it, with my email list. I'm like, guys, we're going to the next level. Like all these things that I thought we were gonna do in our business. And the first day, or the first like session, I guess you can call it, I quickly realized what he was doing. And instead of working on our business, he was working on me. And he was working on, for him, it was all about high performance, and not just high performance for high performance sake, but to get yourself in alignment with your own personal mission, to figure out how to be able to create, right? Like your momentum, right? And once we kind of mastered that, the idea was this, like once we master that, then we can work on your business, because your business is ultimately a reflection of who you are, of what's happening internally. And so if you have all these issues and you think it's an external issue, you think it is, oh, we don't have the right people in place, or I don't know how to do X, or we're not getting enough traffic. Like those all seem like external problems, and they are. There's kind of like the external answer tactics to be able to do so, but internally there's something else that's happening. Right. And, I know you guys talk a lot about this in especially with a name like Universe Between Your Ears, right? You guys believe that, you guys probably genuinely believe that a lot of the things that's happening in your life, it's not happening to you, it's happening because of you.
Exactly.
Right?
I'm glad you didn't say for you.
Right. And that's like the platitude, right? That a lot of people talk about. And I remember the first couple times, first couple sessions with this coach, I was complaining pretty much, right? Like I was like, when are we getting to the good stuff?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I already know this. I know this already. I did this. Like, I don't know, but so you get into the whole ego of, I've already done this. I've already been there. Right. And, the more we dive deeper, the more I realize, it's not because I've just been exposing myself to the content. I never went that extra step of truly immersing myself and applying those things in my own life so that my business could be a true reflection of what I want it to be. Right. And so it's just funny that when I hear you bring that up, it was the first story that kind of popped into my mind, because so many times, I think, business, especially like the people that are listening to my show, like entrepreneurs, I call them change makers, in a lot of ways, I just think that they're creators. I think that they are artists that do it within the realm of business, and a lot of times they didn't have the chops to be able to do it in photography or videography or the traditional sense of art, but in what they do, they believe that to be art, right? And I just love the intersection of the two. I remember when I listened to one thing that Tony Robbins did like years ago. He came to Toronto, where I'm usually based out of, and he did this event, and he just talked about two things. And he's like, if you want to master your life, right? You want to be a master of your life. You want to, be able to dominate and have the right mindset. You have to master these two things, which is the art of fulfillment and the science of achievement, right? I'll say that again, the art of fulfillment and then the science of achievement, right? So if you have one, and he made all these arguments, right? And we could dive into it if you want, but he made all these different arguments on if you have one but not the other, you have all these different examples of, you've seen people in your life that's been like that. You have met people that are wildly successful. You know about this, right? Like celebrities and basketball players and athletes and like people that have achieved an insane amount in this world, and yet they're unhappy, right? Yet they're not quote unquote fulfilled, right? And yet there's other people that are maybe wildly fulfilled, maybe doing exactly, what they want to be doing, but maybe they can't figure out the business side of things. Right. And maybe they can't properly monetize the way that they want, maybe to be able to support themselves or to be able to cover the costs, so it's kind of this fine balance. Right. And to kind of go back to your first, I guess, question or statement, it's kind of what I think about. It's like, how does one become this leader or entrepreneur or whatever you want to call artist? And I think it's about this balance of the art and the business.
Yeah, it makes me think of two people that we've had on the show already. The earlier part of what you were talking about is you're in the inner world reflecting in your business. It makes me think of Delora Guillaume. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing. I'm probably butchering it, but she calls herself the mind sex mentor. Her thing is dealing with people and showing them that your sex life, whatever your sex life is, how good things are in the bedroom is reflected in your business. And people come to her saying, that's
interesting.
Help me with the sales, whatever. Well, how's your sex life? And so she draws that comparison. And then there's the creative thing with entrepreneurs. We just not long ago we had a conversation with Michael Namkung, who teaches creativity, and he works with entrepreneurs and stuff. And he was saying a lot of the same things. It's entrepreneurship is a kind of he's saying that it's an art form.
Yeah,
it's a creative endeavor. There's a lot of non-creative stuff that's attached to making it work, but ultimately it's a creative endeavor because you're trying to create something that you have some sort of a vision for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate what you guys are doing, for example, on this show and in some of the episodes that I've heard, because so much of our, to give context to everybody, so much of my business is being able to support entrepreneurs and thought leaders in not just launching their own podcasts, but to really be able to leverage that for their business, for their marketing. We always say putting a voice, behind your products and services and ultimately your movement. Right. And there's one module that we always teach on the framework of a great interview, and we kind of break down, there's like a, biographical interview, there's like a how-to interview, right? So there's different formats of storytelling and interviewing, but there's one thing I always try to emphasize, always try to underline for people, that's saying that the natural flow of a conversation sometimes, and most times I find, would override every kind of like framework. You can have it in broad strokes, right? But but the problem is sometimes when you give someone the script, you know what I mean? Or when you give someone the exact step-by-step framework, the problem is they're kind of holding it in front of them. And I know exactly how it was for me when I first started like doing interviews. I had printed all these different pieces of papers, like my whole desk was covered, and I was so nervous, like just getting out there and doing anything. And I didn't even have a chance to look down. Yeah. Because if I looked down, I for sure would have broken. I would have been completely lost, right? But when you give someone a script, they tend to just follow it, right? And there lacks the creativity. It kind of makes your content kind of like everyone else, because that's probably what most people are doing, right?
And that's the reason that we do this show the way we do it, because you can get the 5 bullet point. Here are the things that I talk about everywhere, right? You just go to somebody's webpage and you've got those things. But it's in conversation where we get to go back and forth and challenge what the other guy says, or, you argue about different things, and new ideas come out and hard questions come sometimes. That's the stuff that lets the good stuff come out, right? If you're just asking surface questions, all you're going to get is surface information, surface ideas, and, there's plenty of those. So that's kind of one of the goals.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know the team got to meet
bit.
but I mean, obviously we haven't had any contact before. How did that thing come about? How did you discover this being your passion, and what was the journey like?
Well, I appreciate this question, because so many times I think we're always making goals, and it was so nice, some of the things that Tim said in the intro, and it's like, I reflect upon that. And it's like, oh yeah, those are really cool achievements, right? But I think a lot of times we get lost in that achievement race, and we forget to kind of look back and see how far we've actually come, and for me, I wish, in some ways there's all these storylines that I've heard enough interviews, and I've done enough interviews, that there's kind of, common storylines. And sometimes I hear them and I go, oh, I kind of wish, I was an entrepreneur when I was a kid, or, how some people are like, oh, I was always an entrepreneur, I was, selling oranges or selling some other obscure things, or, I was trading baseball cards and like doing that. So I didn't grow up being like this full entrepreneur. My first business was because I wanted to have my own money and I wanted some freedom in my life, and I would mow lawns, right? So I felt like I wish that was one storyline, Another storyline is kind of like, all of this was this big, massive plan, and it was intentional. And the truth with the podcast is that it wasn't that intentional. The truth around that was that at that time, I was trying to make it work as an entrepreneur, as someone who was figuring out who they were, what my message was, and how to be able to market and get it out to the world in a way that actually made sense. Hopefully it would inspire some people. Hopefully they'd find it valuable. I didn't have any products at the time, so I had no idea how the whole, idea of even, not even like making revenue, but even like getting seen and getting engagement even worked. And it got so bad to the point that I was, essentially forced to move back in with my parents at that time. This is about three and a half years ago. And, they had turned my room into kind of like a study. It wasn't a bedroom anymore, essentially. So I had to, on top of moving back, I was moving back into the living room. Okay. So, and that's kind of where I was trying to figure these things out. If you met me at that time, one week I would be focusing on growing my blog, and another week I think I have to be on video, so I'm trying to learn how to be on video. Another week someone tells me, Twitter is making a comeback, so I got to learn Twitter. And I was all over the place, trying to create content, trying to just figure out anything that would work. And, one of the things that one of my kind of friends and just they had their own business, they recommended, they were like, have you ever thought about podcasting? Have you ever thought about having this one, centerpiece where it is going to be your pillar content? You know what I mean? Where you can interview people, you can experiment with different formats, you could, and that's kind of the beauty of, sometimes I reflect on the medium of podcasting, is that it kind of allows us to make mistakes. You know what I mean? It allows us, it's a little more, it allows you to be an amateur, and that's okay. And that's what I was in the beginning. I've never did an interview before, never got on camera before. I know you probably think like, oh, this guy's done it like 1,000 times. Like, but yeah, that's only after like 200-300 episodes. You know what I mean? It's like, so in the beginning I would be hyper scared of, being on camera. I always knew I could do the whole public speaking thing, but the second the video came on with the little red light and it's just me and the camera, I would freeze, right? So the same thing with the interviews. I didn't know every single little step. But when we had launched the podcast, this was summer of 2015. So literally 3 years ago, at the end of summer, I just wanted some listeners, honestly. I was like, oh, we got some great interviews, and if everyone shares it, I think we can get like 50 people to like download the episode. And to my surprise at that time, we had almost accidentally executed, now is more of like a more thorough and meticulous like launch strategy. But back then it was kind of like, let's just throw a bunch of things and let's see what works. Right. And, we were the number, I was surprised to hit number in the top 100 of self-help. And then we kept rising. We became the number one in Canada. And then we started popping up in all these different categories. And, that changed so many things for me. It gave me the opportunity to speak all around the US and Canada. It gave me the opportunity to land my first consulting clients, because they wanted to figure out how we did it, and they wanted to figure out. And truth be told, I didn't know at the time, right? I didn't actually, it's not like I went into it thinking, okay, we're going to do this launch, and in this thing, we're going to leverage it into the next thing. I think so much of this journey, I look back and I say, hey, if you're willing to take the action, clarity typically follows. And I'd spent the previous 25 years waiting for clarity. I'd spent all that time waiting to get clear, waiting to be ready, waiting for one day for me to pursue whatever, right? And, I got sick and tired of it, and I said, I'm going to take action first, and hopefully, if I pray enough, hopefully there's some there's going to be some clarity that comes. And clarity is one of those things that it only comes if you're moving with momentum, right? So that's kind of like a quick synopsis there.
With that team, if you just allow me to follow up here. So then, because you had this goal in mind that you wanted viewership, right?
Yeah.
That's unlike us. I mean, well, I guess we do, right? But for us, it's not like, who wouldn't want to have
primary.
Who wouldn't want to have some listeners, right? But I consider us like a little more of a niche kind of podcast, I guess. So you had that in mind, that primary goal, right? that had to affect the material that you were focusing on, right? I mean, there had to be some kind of idea of what would be in demand, right? And so were you like targeting the millennials in particular, or it just happened to be that the millennials became your audience? I mean,
it's a great question.
Did you find your audience, or did audience find you, in other words?
So I think it's almost always the audience tells you what to kind of create next. I think that's like the golden rule, because I remember when I was first starting out, I took this one online I knew nothing about online marketing, so I took this one online marketing course. I was like the worst student because I couldn't figure week one module one was who's your audience, right? Who's your avatar, right? Every course is like that, you know what I mean? Because if you don't know who you're targeting, if you don't know who you're speaking to, how can you possibly attract them, and how could you possibly expect them to congregate if you're not speaking to their language, right? I was stuck, and I'm not joking, I was stuck on that module for like probably almost the duration of the course. Okay, it was a 12-week course. I was still there probably week 7. Okay, it was bad. It was really bad because I really didn't know who I was going to. I'll share with you one thing, Gabby. I wanted the viewership for sure, right? I wanted the engagement. I wanted, some level of validation, I think, to keep it real, because I think all content creators, when they're first starting, they just want some validation, positive or negative, right? But another way that I always looked at it was that if I was going to grow and I was going to take this seriously through interviews, then how could I interview the person in a way that gave back value to them, right? If they're promoting a book, if they're promoting a course, or if they're just getting their message out there, how can I help them share their message, right? And I can kind of ride their coattails right? If maybe they share it with their audience, and they have an audience of, it doesn't even matter, 5,000 people, let's just say, right, 1% of that, are open to me. If they kind of like their message and it kind of makes sense for them to listen to my podcast, then that's how I always looked at audience growth, right? And so in the beginning, Tim was saying it, the theme of my show is this idea of choosing legacy over currency. I didn't know how to, there's parts of me that still don't know how to be able to answer that, right? If you were like, hey, here, what are the 10 steps to be able to go and guarantee this is the legacy you're going to create? I didn't know that, but here's the thing. I didn't need to know that, because I could reach out. As you guys know, once you have a podcast, you have a platform to be able to reach out to others, people that, their work has maybe made a difference in your life. Maybe you admire them for whatever, something you read or something they created, right? And now I looked at it as a way of being able to give thanks. You know what I mean? And the truth is, I felt like I was having these conversations all the time. I just wasn't pressing record, And I thought, why not have this podcast, this medium that grows with me? Why not record the best and the worst? You know what I mean? And have a way of recording my own breakthroughs so that everybody could win, right? I could win by practicing and being able to leverage content that I created with the thought leader or the influencer. They could win because the more people I have, the more people will hopefully hear their story and their message. And the audience would win because they would get a true insight into maybe what the whole thing is like behind the scenes. So for me, that's always been my focus. I remember in that course, just to wrap up that story, everybody at the end of it was launching a course, right? And once I figured out my audience, or I thought I figured it out, I said, you know what? I know what to do. I looked at the module. I'm going to go and create the course, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to have a product, and I'm going to have a course, right? Like, easy. So I did that for like probably 2 months, and I know it seems like it's ridiculous, but this is actually what people would do, right? And this is what actually I did. I spent 2 months like recording these videos, like coming up with like the framework, and recording them the best I can, like refining it. And then when I launched, I made virtually zero sales. And it was heartbreaking because I was like, I was going to have this course and I'm going to start pushing it. And I was like, why did this happen? And the reason it happened is because I never primed an audience for it. one. And then two, no one asked me to create it. Like no one in my entire sphere of influence asked me to create it. I just thought it was a great idea, so I created it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I to answer your question, I do always think it's the audience will kind of tell you what it is that they
feedback loop, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people are missing. You know, I think mm-hmm. they're always thinking,
yeah,
right.
This strikes me, there's a kind of a catch-22 going on there a lot of the time, though, is that if you don't have an audience to start with, how do you talk to your audience? So it's, in some sense, you've got to just jump in and start.
Yeah, well, right. One of the things I remember, I'm pretty sure it was Marie Forleo, and this was like, this is living room days. All right. So I was like consuming content, and every day, like, can you just imagine like my parents who had like immigrated, you know, themselves to Canada, that had put me all the way through school, and like I had a great job and all this kind of stuff. So they would come home and they kind of watch me. But I remember this one quote from Marie Forleo. She said, always speak to your audience as if it's bigger than, you know, than your highest ambition. You know, speak to them as if it's there already, right? And I thought that was really interesting. I didn't like look into it, you know what I mean? I didn't overthink it by any means, but I remember that line. And I always thought, you know what? It's kind of like one of those things about attracting or manifesting things in your life, right? It's almost like if you are prepared for it and you're already there, you know what I mean? Then it's just a matter of the people being there and discovering you. Right. So for me, even from episode like 000 or like episode 1 or, you know, the origin episodes, I've always spoken to my audience as if it was, you know, millions and 10 million. Like it was just because I wanted to not just be there someday, but I want, at the end of the day, I think you do it for you're right, because there is two sides of it, right? Vanity metrics sell. And so you do want to, you know, speak to them in that way and portray that and create that atmosphere, because no one ever wants to be the only person that buys. No one ever wants to be the only person that's at the thing. But when you create content, this is the distinction. When I create content, when any of our private clients, like when they get on the Facebook Live or Instagram story, it doesn't matter what the platform is. When they create content, we try to create it for one person. Mm-hmm. Just having like one specific person in mind, knowing it might polarize the other side of it, right? Knowing that 80% of the people, it might not resonate with it. That's okay, because we're speaking to that one segment of our audience, and that's fine, right? Because when that one person hears it, they go, we're in the business of creating true believers. You know, I think that's what all great content creators do, is that they get you to believe in a bigger vision of yourself. You know, they get you to believe in a bigger vision for your business, for yourself. It doesn't matter exactly what it is, but you buy into it. So therefore, if you want that bigger vision, you keep listening, you keep watching, you keep buying, right? And so it's about, I think, in the business of building a movement, that's what it boils down to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I want to go back a little to what you were saying about interviewing. You know, like you were talking about interviewing your heroes kind of in business and stuff, and you wanted to bring something to them, right? You wanted to be of service to them. Yeah. And this makes me think about a topic that's come up at a couple of different times. I don't know if you know who Chris Burns is. He's got a podcast, or he does 12-hour marathon shows. Yeah,
marathon. Yeah.
And I had a conversation. Excuse me. I had a conversation with him, and this idea of what everybody says, you're going to become sort of the average of the 5 people that you hang out with most, right? That you associate with most. And the idea came to me while he and I were talking about this, that in order, you know, the problem is that you want to be, if your goal is to be a millionaire, right? You need to hang out with millionaires. But they don't necessarily want to hang out with you because you're not bringing anything to the table, right? It's not that they dislike you, but they've got their people, and they're happy to add somebody if you're adding some value. So you have to figure out how to be or create something more than what you are in the moment. And that just and it applies across all areas of life. I think it's just a relationship issue, right? If you want to get a particular kind of partner, do you want a girl who's you want to marry, you want to step up when you marry, or you want to marry up level, you've got to be bringing something that she wants. And maybe you don't see it in yourself, but you got to create it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that sort of aiming at a target that's above you, right? It's, aim for the stars and you'll reach the moon. That's going to bring you up. Right?
For sure.
That's the kind of thing we all need to kind of try to do intentionally, I think.
I've been really fortunate in the people that have come on my podcasts. We've had on, and Tim, you probably know, some or recognize some of the names of individuals. And it's not about a whole name dropping thing. It's not even about that. But it blows my mind half the time. That we've had on 3 billionaires and all these New York bestsellers, and literally I've had moments where I finished a book. Like a really great book. This happened many a times. Essentialism, Greg McKeown. He came on the podcast. The guy who wrote The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks, who rarely does interviews, right? Reached out to him and his team and to do an interview. So it always blows my mind who comes on. But I love that you point this out, because you're right. It's 100% relationships. It's 100% in how you create them and how you come across and how you ask. I very rarely have ever been asked about what are my numbers or what are my downloads. Maybe it's the whole being in the top 100 thing. Maybe there's a whole perception there. Or maybe it's the lists. I feel like now at this stage it's a little easier for me to interview whoever, right? Because I've had a track record of interviewing different thought leaders, but it's the same. I think it's I always thought about how mentorship. I feel like old school mentorship was if you find a mentor, you should take them out for coffee or lunch, right? Buy them lunch, or buy them dinner, right? And I don't know, I don't know who put this or implanted this thought, but it's these people don't need lunch. You know what I mean? They don't need you to pick up the tab on. Yeah, exactly. They don't need you to buy the latte. You know what I mean? That's not thinking of yourself as someone that's bringing value, right? And I almost, in a lot of selfish ways, created the podcast because I always looked at it as a platform to highlight these special individuals, what we call change makers. These people that were out there building their legacies, that they had something, they had a way more experience, way more depth. They knew way more than I did. They have way more experience than I did. And it just gave me a way of highlighting them, right? And instead of, gifting me with half an hour of their time or an hour of their time, right? I never, ever approached any of them thinking it like that. It was oh, would you be so kind to give me an hour of your time to come share your knowledge on our podcasts? I think you always have to view it, regardless of if you view it, however you view it is how you view it, right? But in the way that you start the relationship, if you could position it in a way that is going to be mutually beneficial, that you are going to be able to give them some value, right? And at the end of the day, if you're talking to and this is just my experience, right, with people that have written some really great books, that have done some great marketing, that they've built out some of their own legacies, and they have their people that are taking their courses and kind of preaching their message out there. They totally understand that whether appearing on one podcast or 100, the reason they do it is to speak to that one person. Right? Because they know hard that, and this kind of goes back to the video you brought up, right? Which is that advice, that piece of advice, right? I always think you have no idea who's listening. You have no idea who's watching and listening. You have no idea who this might make a difference for. You know, we all might have an idea or a guess at who it might be, but you never know. You never ever know. And I've just always been blown away and humbled when I get a chance to meet people that have either taken our course. I've never met them, right? And I'll meet them at like an event. New Media Summit was similar. I met a couple of my students and I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Like you guys are real, you know? And they're like, oh, you're real. Like you're exactly, you know, like this guy on Instagram or whoever, like wherever they follow me.
Yeah.
And it's always humbling to meet these people, but you never know which piece of, you know what I mean? Like which piece of content.
Hi, this is Tim Starr. Thanks for joining me and Gabi on the universe between your ears. We really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us for a little while. And we'd like to see you again. So be sure to subscribe wherever it is you're consuming the podcast from, whether it's YouTube or Stitcher or iTunes or whatever the hell else is out there. We want to see you again. We also want to hear from you. So let us know what you think of each episode. Let us know if you've got an idea for a future episode that you think would be just killer. Absolutely, let us know. All right? Thanks again, and we will see you next time around. Bye-bye.